Oh, no, thank you. Oh, gosh, thank you. Can I say I went to Asheville? Thank you all, thank you. Hearing that, when I hear that list, I say, God, no wonder I'm exhausted. And I'll thank you guys when you Google me. Yes, I've had a few hairdos, and they all live on Google, so please bear with me. I want to thank some people and just talk to all of you about how lucky you are to live in this little slice of heaven at this university where all of you here know this, but Janet and I just came from my 37th Final Four. I just missed Magic and Bird. I started with the Doctors of Dunk at Louisville. And so I've had many, many press conferences, and they always say, and now we'll hear from the student athletes. And so many of us roll our eyes because that meant, you know, a guy's freshman semester, and then he's going to the NBA. But here you are student athletes. You go on to great careers in athletics or in medicine or in finance, and everybody here should be so proud. Will you give yourselves a hand for being at the University of North Carolina at Asheville? It is so special here. And I learned this with Janet Cohn. By the way, you are in great hands with her. And I learned this, that you cannot say no to Janet Cohn. Now, you might say, oh, I'll think about it. Don't even bother. If Janet Cohn wants you to do something, you are going to do it. And she is so respected nationally. Maybe you don't hear enough about this, but she is on the men's, as you know, NCAA basketball committee. And I will tell you, that is the job everyone in athletics would love to be involved with. And I always say the NCAA men's basketball committee, they're actually like the Supreme Court of athletics. And to see Janet, I think there's one more, Bernadette? She did, so just two of them. You just must know how enormous, what the kind of respect you must command to have that job. So when Janet said, I'm coming to Asheville, I'm coming to Asheville, and I'm so glad. I want to thank a couple of other people. Robin from Morgan Stanley, yeah, there you are, thank you. Last night was a blast. And of course, Donna Peak and Betsy. I will tell you this about Betsy. Janet was not kidding. She could be like CIA detail. And there's just, so I actually said to Betsy, she showed me the schedule, I said, do you think you could work in, you know, a bathroom break for me? And Betsy said, I think I have time at 12:27. Oh God, I better hurry. But she is so great for all of you to have. And of course, to Lynn and Kelly, you guys have been great. What a great committee, what a great group. I will say to both Chrissy and Coach Mock, I went to Boston College, and you guys pretty much crushed us. Yeah, they're nodding away. Look at them, nodding away. Crushed us. So I'm going to try to change my attitude now that you're here, but have always had great respect for both of you. And being here in the Sherrill Center, I'm in a lot of gyms all over the country, and you should be really proud of this gym. It's just perfect, and anybody, I would think, would want to come and to play here. So thank you all. I wanted to be a sports writer from the time I was 10 years old. And you have to imagine the job did not exist for women. This was 1963. My family moved around quite a bit, and we were living in Cincinnati. And I was a kid who, I'm a born, bred, and bled Red Sox fan. And I don't know if J.W. Davis, I don't know if he's here, but I met him last night at Chancellor Cable's house, and I said, I did not come all the way to Asheville to meet a Yankee fan. I mean, really? Really? So I'll thank all of you not to raise Yankee fans, but so I started. Are there any Yankee fans in here? Really? You call yourself an American? All right. Well, now Red Sox fans, we finally got a little obnoxious after being gum on your shoe for 100 years. But I remember thinking the first time I went to Fenway Park, the first time, I'm a native Bostonian, but we moved quite a bit, but I went when I was 8 years old, and walking into Fenway for me was like, you know how in The Wizard of Oz when it changes to Technicolor? That I could not believe it, and I had listened on cheap transistors to the Red Sox games, the great Kirk Gowdy did them, but when I went to Fenway, I just said, this is it for me. You know, other kids love poetry or music, but I love sports, and I learned my favorite play is the double play in baseball, and I was 8 years old sitting in the bleachers at Fenway, and I could score 6-4 to 3 at 8 years old. I said, this is where I belong, which did not mean I was ever going to be accepted, but for quite a long time. But we were living in Cincinnati. I was 10 years old, and my mom said to me, she was a teacher, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be a sports writer, which was kind of like hearing, I'm going to the moon, you know, 10 years old in 1963. Okay, don't do the math. All right, anyway, 1963. And I said, I want to be a sports writer. And instead of saying, you know how we can all change a child's life in one sentence? Instead of saying, oh, you can't do that. You have to be a nurse or a secretary, a domestic, or a teacher. She said to me, that's great. Sometimes you have to cross when it says don't walk. Pretty great for 10 years old. So it like gave me permission to follow a dream, which was just unheard of then. And I went to Boston College, as I noted. We could do without that face, if you don't mind over here. But I won't go into my defense. It's hard to be a great team in a pro town, okay? Okay, right, let's just all establish that. Even if we beat Carolina or Wake, right? You think we're gonna get ahead of the Red Sox, or the Patriots, or the Bruins or the Celtics? What a year. But I went to Boston College and I wrote for the school paper, and then I heard of a Carnegie Foundation grant. I mean, all of you know internships can be the way to go, and this internship was given to 20 women in America. It was a Carnegie Foundation grant for women who wanted to go to jobs that were 95% male, which in 1973 or 4, all jobs were. So a woman from Michigan got it for archaeology, a woman from Johns Hopkins got it for ophthalmology, and I got it for sports writing. So I went to the Boston Globe, which was really the foundation of all I am. They made me the first woman to cover the NFL. And just to tell you how long ago, just so you know that whatever it is that you want to do, I'm the example that you can do it. Job did not exist for women, so I don't care if you are black or white, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, gay, straight, Hispanic, Republican, Democrat, whatever it is you want to do, I am the example that you can do it. So dream big and get after it. But I went to the Globe. They made me the first woman to cover the NFL. But the first year, I was sharing this last night, I have many humiliating stories, right? And they all play out on network television. But this was one when I was at the Boston Globe. Most writers start out covering high school football. That's kind of the training everybody gets. So I had the smallest division in Massachusetts for my beat, and all the schools had two names because they were regional. So it was Acton, Boxborough, Lincoln, Sudbury. So I always had Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. So you'd have to take the ferry. I know this sounds like the 1800s, but you'd have to take the ferry, keep all the stats yourself, you know, umbrella in one hand, notepad in the other, running up and down, taking all the stats. Great way to learn. But when I first started, you know how when you really first are learning football, or I'd watched it as a kid, but never, you know, took down plays or anything. And you know how you go up to the 50, and then you got to do the math, right? He runs 17 yards up to the 50, and then it crosses the 50, and then you got to change the math. So what did I care? I gave the kid another 25 yards, right? Really. In the Boston Globe, you know, Patriots, Celtics, Red Sox, Bruins, who's going to read my little story on Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard? So, and I had to cover them every week. So one day in the Globe, the phone rang. This is a true story. The phone rang. Leslie, it's for you. I answer, you know, hello, and this is what I hear. Leslie, this is Coach Paul Bryan of Alabama. Like, what? I said, yes, yes, coach. He said, I see you got a player up there at Martha's Vineyard rushing for 450 yards a game. Is this somebody I should be looking at? I mean, no film right back then. I'm way before Google anything, nothing. And I'm saying, no, coach, I don't really think the 5'4" fisherman's son is really what you want, coach. No, he's planning to go to medical school. I really don't think. So I started getting some scar tissue early on, and for anybody who knows Boston or probably wherever you're from, but humor was my mechanism for coping. And just to imagine when I first started covering the Patriots, there were, let's see, the credential I wore, first woman to cover the NFL as a beat, 1975, I guess. The credential, as I was going to cover the game, said on it, no women or children in the press box, right? Pretty diminishing, right? So it's part of why I'm so excited to be here. You know, I always said I didn't want to be the first. I wanted to be the first of many, and that's what you all are here. So I am so thrilled at what you're doing and the lunch and Janet's leadership and how you all contribute. There also were no ladies' rooms, right? Because there were no other women. So I used to sit up there in the press box. Patriots would have the ball, 1st and 10 on their own 20, and I'd say, can I get down the press box, across the field to the one ladies' room, and get back up before they punted? And they were not the gold standard Patriots that they are today, so it wasn't Brady chewing up time, leading them down the field. So I had to be, I just told Janet this, I had to be like Usain Bolt, right? Over to the bathroom, get back up, make sure, because it was only a couple plays and then they punted. But when I think about, you know, it just sounds like such another time, and it was another time in another world. And people always say to me, you know, how did you get the courage to get off the boat and clear the land? But it was just passion. And for all of you here, I mean, you know this or you wouldn't be here, but it doesn't matter what business you are in. You are going to need 3 elements. Oh God, Betsy's probably on my clock, okay. You're going to need 3 elements to make it. Or you already have it, that's why you're here. You must have knowledge. Knowledge is unassailable. No one can question it if you have knowledge. The second is you must have passion. If you don't love it, don't do it, because it's going to come out somewhere. I mean, I was making $12,000 at the Boston Globe, but I didn't care. I was going to Wimbledon, I was going to the Final Four, I was going to the Super Bowl, and other people who maybe spent a lot of years at a job they didn't like, but they made money. And I really want to tell you that if you have passion, you won't notice the money. And if you don't have passion, you'll eventually get angry at a coworker, or why didn't I get that promotion? It'll come out somewhere. So you need passion, and you also need stamina. And so many of you here are student athletes. I love saying that. You are student athletes, and you know that stamina is half of it. You know, maybe the first year, you don't get off the bench, but by your junior year, you're Big South, you're on a conference all-star team, and that doesn't happen without stamina. So those are really the elements that you need. Like I said, I come from the sports end of society, where I have learned that you can do anything if you carry yourself in a certain way. My confidence came later, and I had many humiliating moments. I remember, you're too young for this, but there was a great quarterback from LSU named Burt Jones who followed Johnny Unitas with the Colts. And he was a great-looking guy from LSU. So, of course, there were no provisions for me the first 7 years I covered the NFL, which meant I was by myself in the parking lot. And Burt Jones came out after a Colts game, and I'm there, you know, with my notepad like this, and he said, hey, you know, you ever been to Baltimore? You want like a round-trip ticket? And I went into my glorious dynam, absolutely not, this is my job, I take it seriously. And he finally brushed me on the shoulder and said, hey, you're not that great. And he's such a gentleman now, he'll say it didn't happen that way, but it did. But I mean, so I had lots of, the very first question I asked of the Patriot coach, his name was Chuck Fairbanks then, and I'm really nervous, right? I'm 23, 24 years old, I'm on the Patriot beat, and my first question to him was, now at left guard, who do you see will be starting? And the first thing he said to me was, you're about the same age as my daughter. You ought to go to lunch together. And I was like, okay, here's another embarrassing story. So I did ask him another day about a linebacker or someone who's going to start, and so there were two guys. One was injured, and the other was coming along, probably should have been the starter. Main starter was injured. And I asked him, who's going to start? And he said to me, they were going to play the Dolphins against Dan Marino, and he says, they were linemen, offensive linemen, I'm sorry. And he says, neither one can play the position. So I go driving back to the Boston Globe at 1,000 miles an hour. Oh my God, the coach says nobody can protect the quarterback against the Miami Dolphins, who were great then. And so the Boston Globe, big thing, coach says neither one can play the position. I mean, you're all coaches here, imagine saying that. All right, so my phone rings at 5:30 the next morning. I will skip the invectives in the beginning. And then after like about 10 seconds screaming at me, he said, what kind of an idiot are you? I said, either one can play the position. Close, right? Yeah, it was close. It was close. And, well, oh God, I know. Why did I tell that? So my career has just had all of this, but I've had some really profound experiences. CBS sent me to the fall of the Berlin Wall, which was, of course, the story of the century, and my little slice. That's why any of you as athletes, you know this, anyone who goes into sports, it's the ultimate passport. You go all over the world, you meet all kinds of people, and my father was Dutch. He was not Jewish, but he grew up under the Nazi occupation for 6 years. Everybody was starving in the Netherlands. And so CBS, I had a little slice of the pie. Of course, it was Dan Rather and all our news people, but I had a little slice of the pie where I was going to do how would sports change in East Germany. Do you all remember Katharina Witt, the great skater? Well, she was beautiful, right? And she was from East Germany, and she was the beautiful face of socialism. So my story, when the wall came down, was how would sports change? And I mean, you all remember East Germany went from like no medals to, 40 medals in the Olympics, a small country, and you might remember that's when the women had beards. So it was very evident that this was not on the level. So they sent me, but Katarina was beautiful. She won 2 gold medals at that time. It was even, Wall fell in '89, so yeah, she'd won 2 gold medals. And I got to go through Checkpoint Charlie, and if you ever forget how proud we should be to be Americans, I watched people who walked from Dresden and Potsdam for days through the Brandenburg Gate just to taste freedom. And I thought, yikes, we should never, we're born here, we're on third base. And it was such a great reminder, which a lot of this job does teach you. Do most of you remember Martina Navratilova? I remember her. She was great. And she defected from Czechoslovakia in 1975. And when you defect from a communist country, you become a non-person. And she went on to win 5 straight Wimbledons, and not one word of her was written in the Czech media. She was dead to them. And in 1986, we have something here called, you had the Fed Cup here, didn't you? Oh, yeah, great. So you know how great that is, right? It's like American all-star team. Well, they were playing in Prague. So she got to go back to Prague under the umbrella of the U.S. government, the protection of the Fed Cup. So we flew, I had known her pretty well by then, and I got to cover it, and we went from Frankfurt to Prague, still communist, on this crummy Hungarian airline, Maliv or something, and we get into Prague, pouring rain. Of course, they had no jetway. And just picture if you're Martina. So they open the door. She's at the top of the stairs. She sees a chain link fence for probably half a mile. And behind it were hundreds and hundreds of people with their kids on their shoulders who had defied the Czech government because they heard by word of mouth that the great Martina was coming home. God. Makes me emotional. It was, so sports does take you there. I've had the privilege to meet Nelson Mandela. I interviewed Francois Pinard, who was the character who Matt Damon played, the rugby. I mean, when you think of Nelson Mandela, he was in a cell for 27 years that he could touch either side, and he did not come out bitter. He came out wanting to reunite South Africa. So, I mean, I've learned a lot. I've had the privilege to be a witness, and I've learned a lot. Okay, time for another embarrassing story? Okay, wherever Lynn is, this is her favorite. All right, so I go from the Boston Globe, where I had covered everything, 10 Final Fours, 10 Wimbledons, 10 US Opens, but I had zero TV experience, zero. I didn't get to go to Des Moines or Albuquerque. I went right to CBS Network. Did I mention I had no TV experience? Okay, good. So I went in the fall, first event's a US Open, and this was back when the United States, we had Chris and Martina and Connors and McEnroe. It was huge. Well, there was a player from Prague who'd grown up idolizing Martina. Her name was Hanna Mandlikova, and she had a great summer. She went from 55th to 5th in the world, and she won the US Open. But this was an early round. So now I'm so nervous. I mean, you probably can't believe it now, but my first time on TV, I looked like I had rigor mortis. It was like this. Thank you, Brent. So, all right, so I'm not nervous enough, right? And they say, Leslie, you go out to court 16 and interview Hanna Mandlikova. She had another win. She had a great summer. So I go out to interview her, and I say, Hanna, to what do you attribute your sudden rise in the rankings? And she's from Prague. She says, well, I think it is my new couch. So I thought, wow, maybe she's sleeping better? I don't know. So now, on network television, I say to her, did you get some new furniture? Imagine her. And she looks at me and she says, don't be ridiculous. Betty Stova, my new coach. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Brent's head hits the table. Everybody in the truck their head hits the table. And then, of course, CBS would play it at every seminar. Didn't matter if it were the Final Four seminar, Masters seminar. Oh, remember the time, Leslie? So I want you all to know that you can survive national humiliation. What sports does for anyone, particularly women, thank you so much for coming to this lunch, is it gives you two things. It gives you opportunity, and the great thing about sports is it is a meritocracy. I always say it's the greatest meritocracy in America because it doesn't matter where your father went to college. It doesn't matter how much money your mother had. If you sink the jumper or the punt, if you hit the jumper or you sink the putt, that is who you are. It has nothing to do with anyone else. And that is why it is so thrilling to me to see women emerge in this, and year after year. It wasn't like, even for my own job, it wasn't like, okay, there was Nancy Lieberman and then women never did anything again. Or I was a writer and a broadcaster and women never did it again. And I am so thrilled. CBS, we have the only, I don't know if you know this, Janet, we have the only all-women's sports show on network television. And it is such a privilege for me. Can you imagine? I get to work with Swin Cash and Lisa Leslie and Dara Torres, who went to 5 Olympics, and Amy Trask, who was the CEO of the Raiders for 30 years. And we talk ball. And it's just, I don't know. So it gives me, it really warms me that we have come to this point. And I think part of what got us here was, if you all don't remember it, you should go read about it. When Billie Jean King played Bobby Riggs, it was 1973. I was still in college, but people might not remember. 90 million people around the world watched that event because it wasn't about tennis. It was about gender equity. It was about societal equity. It was about financial equity. And I really think that match was the seminal moment of the women's movement. And everybody who doesn't know about it, go back, because Billie Jean really didn't want to do it, but Margaret Court had lost so badly to Bobby Riggs that Billie Jean felt, I've got to do this because otherwise people are going to think, see, women can't do it. So it was really like a great moment in our society, and I think a lot of you bear the fruit of that, as you did from Title IX. Before I forget, I have to admit, I was a strange child, but probably some of you, please nod in that you recognize this. Let's see, on Halloween, everybody, native Bostonian, everybody would dress up as Mary Poppins, and I would go as Sam Jones, the guard for the Celtics. So my mother, you think she wasn't having a vodka in the back, but it was, I didn't see color, I just saw greatness, I didn't care. I love sports, and I would do his number 24 on my little white t-shirt. And now, of course, after all these years, I've come to know Sam very well. Along the way, he sent me a couple of signed jerseys. And Sam's in his 80s now, and I'm in my 60s, and every year Sam Jones calls me and says, please, Leslie, you're in your 60s, do not wear that on Halloween. But I don't care. I don't care. That's what I do. People have to take great chances on people, which in my career, Janet, I'm going to have to come work for you. In 45 years, I have never been hired by a woman. And it is so encouraging to me to see your staff, to see all the coaches, because I just never, I mean, I'm so grateful to the men who hired me along the way. One thing that was interesting, the best players to me when I started were the black players, because they used to say to me, they weren't that far removed in the early 70s from grandsons of sharecroppers, and they used to say to me, I'd say, why are you so good to me? And they said, because we know what it's like to be the only one. And I always had, you know, relationships. I guess I kind of want to finish with a couple of things that the greatest advice I ever got in my life was from my mother. Sometimes you have to cross when it says don't walk. And the other that I'd like to leave you with is from the great Billie Jean King. All of you as athletes, coaches, sponsors, people who love sports. Billie Jean King, if you don't remember, she won 20 Wimbledon titles. Doubles, mixed doubles, 6 singles. And one time I asked her over at Wimbledon, I said, Billie, what is the pressure of always being in the Wimbledon final? And she looked at me like she didn't understand it. And she said, are you kidding? Pressure is a privilege. So all of you really must have that. It actually belongs on the wall in whatever gym you're in, because that's what she said, and that's how she looked at life. So I thank all of you for the pressure and the privilege, and you know what? It is our turn to play. So thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Wow. Yeah, when someone comes to Asheville, we know how to thank people. So yeah, thank you so much. Here is a little bulldog gift for you.
Excellent.
Because you look good in orange, but you'll look better in royal blue. Isn't that right? Yeah.
Emphasis on the royal.
Yeah, emphasis on, thank you so much. Wow. That was phenomenal. Thank you so much.
My humiliating stories.
I like those. I like that. I actually think that Leslie and I, maybe we had the same mother, because I'm one of those kind of people, I always walk when they say don't walk. Y'all notice that, so that's pretty good. I love that advice.